With 1 day's worth of breath left in his lungs, he longed to express his love to a room full of awkwardly faithful men who could never have grasped the glory that their grimy feet had stepped in unless he bent his knee to wash them. So he did what he always did, what he had to do to eclipse the multitude of moral decay, the perpetual ineptitude gathered round his table. They had come to share a meal with him, but he had come to deal with them in a whole nother way. That is to say, I now interrupt this dinner with friends to bring you the story of a small-town rabbi who did more with a rag tied round his waist than most of us do in a lifetime. Jesus, the only man to ever live up to every word he ever spoke, took off his cloak and bore his unblemished soul in the presence of 11 students of his game and one desperately insecure traitor. Judas was his name. And Jesus knew him well, like the palms of his hands that would soon be impaled on the cross between thieves on a hill. Judas had not the will to count up the cost of what it meant to follow Jesus. He was in it, but for the wrong reasons, hoping to be a cabinet pick in an earthly government. But Jesus was about that eternal covenant life. And even though he knew that this man would sell him down the creek that night with a kiss on the cheek in exchange for 30 coins that he wouldn't even keep, pocket change, and the approval of the religious elite, he already knew his friend was really a frenemy, masquerading his greed and lust for power as loyalty. In his darkest hour, he knew that the whole thing was an elaborate ruse. But that night, in that room, like he had nothing better to do, Jesus washed Judas' feet too. He could not eschew his identity as the one who came to love his enemies, not to be served by the strong, but to serve the weak, to give his life as a ransom, not for the clean, but for the rest of us walking around on dirty feet. For the destitute, for the prostitute, he is the substitute. For the prisoner, for the wanderer, he is the rescuer, the Son of God, the Word made flesh. The light of these imperfect men got on his knees, not to worship them, but to wash them clean, even the worst of them. And knowing that he could never live up to it, Judas sat tacitly and let Jesus do it. But make no mistake, Jesus was not shamed or surprised or reviled in any way. See, even Peter didn't want to let him be great, but they didn't take advantage of him that day. He alone held the keys to the door of his fate. Nobody humbled him. He humbled himself to the point of emptiness, something Judas couldn't comprehend because he was too bloated with ambition to behold the basic facts of his condition. He was lost, tossed by the wind of what he thought could set him free. A day later, he and Jesus both hung from a tree, but only one would be redeemed from the grave. So I'll save the pontificating for another poem on another day. Let's just get the facts straight. Jesus came from on high to get down real low so that we would know how to serve the folks who betray us, how to love the ones who will never love us back, how to give without expecting a return on our investment. He was arrested, charged, found guilty in a kangaroo trial that left many feet filthy with deceit and dishonor. He begged his Father not to make him do it, but when it came down to it, he did what he always did, what he had to do: sacrificial servitude with a rag tied round his waist, the embodiment of grace and truth as his body was bruised and hung on the cross, reminiscent of how he wrung out the dross of a Benedict Arnold type who was there that night in that room when Jesus washed Judas' feet too.